Hey mamas, welcome to this episode of Confessions of a Small Biz Mama. And today we are going to talk about how to get it all done when your kids won't nap. Now, no matter where your kids are, if they still rely on you, this is something that I think you can implement. I think it's a really great thing to do in the afternoons. Frankly, I'm even working some of this in for me before I start working in the afternoon. I've been actually reading some books where they're talking about the need for us all to have some quiet time, some restorative time in the afternoon. And so if your kids aren't napping anymore, I would highly suggest that you work some quiet time into your afternoon. Now, if your kids are still napping or they're getting to the point where they're starting to maybe not nap all the time, that's where Eric is right now. You can still do this. So we're going to talk about how do you set yourself up for success with this. What do you actually have your kids do during quiet time, and why you might need some quiet time as well. Okay, so if you're not familiar with what quiet time is, quiet time is basically time that your child spends in their room, where you or your spouse is not there, where they're resting, right? They're kind of rejuvenating a little bit, they're restoring. But that's really what the afternoon nap was for, right? It was a restorative time for your kids to get some sleep. And what we found with Eric is sometimes he sleeps. Sometimes he'll play for a while and then he'll sleep. So maybe he doesn't need the full time sleeping anymore. But he'll take a little bit of a nap. And I want to say, as I start this, so like if your kids play for a little while and then they go to sleep, make sure that you wake them up at their normal wake time. And from the research that I've done, they say that after 3 o'clock, you start to use up, or your child will start to use some of their nighttime melatonin. And so you kind of want to make sure that you wake them up by 3, so that way they can transition to bed well. I know sometimes it's like really tempting because you're like, oh, they're still asleep. I could get a little bit more work done, or I could get this done, or get that done. But then you're gonna pay for it at bedtime. Okay, so so what we do, we have the way that our schedule works is we have lunch. We kind of let Eric play for a little bit, and then we go upstairs. We do potty. We do let's see. So we do potty. We put on sleep diaper. We kind of pick up the room a little bit, kind of get his bed all situated if we hadn't done it previous to that. And then we'll read a book together. Okay, and we'll do some snuggles. So it's almost like it's like that routine that we had for nap, right? When nap was kind of a given. A lot of times what we'll do those, instead of reading a book in his bed, we'll read a book. He has a rocking chair in his room, and so we'll read the book in the rocking chair. Sometimes we'll read 2 books. We'll talk about the morning a little bit. Eric calls it mama time. Mama time is any time that Eric is on my lap. That's how he defines it. I'm trying to get him to broaden that, that definition, because there are sometimes we spend time together and he doesn't consider that mama time because he wasn't sitting on my lap. It's a thing. It's toddlers. Toddlers make really interesting rules, I find. And I guess it's funny because I keep calling Eric a toddler, but he's technically a preschooler now because he's 3. Um, it's I don't even know how we got here. Mamas, do you do that? You're like, I don't even know how we got here. And I know some of you have like kids in like high school that you're like you're still trying to figure out how you got there. Yeah, I have no idea. I don't know how we got to 3. Um, but so but it looks very much like our pre-nap routine. Um, hey, I am holding on to this nap for as long as I can because I found that I think there are a lot of days Eric still needs it. Um, but he has like he doesn't want to go to sleep because mom and dad aren't there. Um, or he'd rather play with his toys. Totally get it. Okay, so once you have got, what you're going to do as your routine in place, right? Which that's our routine. It doesn't have to be your routine, but that's just our routine. And so once, we read the book, we did some mama time, um, then I say, okay, Eric, it is now, this is now your quiet time. You have no running. We kind of go through some rules. Um, he has to stay in his room. If he does not stay in his room on his own, we actually have like a baby gate that we can put in the door, and we'll use that a little bit just kind of say like, no, no, really, we're serious. And I know that that's not Montessori, and it's um, but there are times that Jeff and I like we have deadlines and work we have to get done. Um, and also it is very good for Eric to have quiet time. And so, we kind of have to balance a little bit. So Eric has free reign of his entire room. He's got typically we've got some Legos in there. He's got a whole bunch of books in there, including picture books he can flip through. He's got stuffed animals and blankets, and he'll actually he'll actually pack up his animals with blankets and like wrap them up and get them ready for bedtime too. Sometimes we'll let him bring up a car or a truck, although I find that when I mix cars and trucks with Legos, there ends up being lots of like dumping and crashing, and it's just I think I don't know, it's a boy thing, I guess. But puzzles make really good. If your kids can do puzzles on their own. I don't do anything with screens. I read a whole bunch of things where like you could give them screens. I try not to do that. We try to minimize his screen time as much as we can. We use it judiciously. So, if we want to sleep in one morning, Eric will come into our room, watch some cartoons. If we really need to clean up around the house, and he's having no, uh, he does not want to help or kind of play on his own, we might give him a little bit of TV for that. But we try to use it sparingly and judiciously. And and that works really well for us. So I personally would not put a screen in for his rest time. But I think there's lots of different things you can do. You can do dolls, you can do stuffed animals, you can do puppets. You could do trains. Trains are relatively quiet for most kids. Um, don't do things that are loud. Don't do things that your child is going to get frustrated if you're not there. So like Eric is really good at puzzles. If you have a kid who struggles with puzzles a little bit or more difficult puzzles, I wouldn't give your child anything that's going to frustrate them. Okay. So I think that's a really good kind of benchmark. You want things that are quiet, things that aren't going to frustrate your child, things that you wouldn't want them to play with on their own, so things with really small parts you wouldn't want to do. Now, even for older kids, So let's say you've got kids that are, 7, 8, 9. Maybe you've even got kids that are, preteen. Um, quiet time can be really good for them too. Um, quiet time is a great time to put down electronics, put away your phones, do some reading, do some creative writing, drawing. I think there's lots of things you can do with older kids. Um, have it be a time where your kids get to be creative, um, or they get to, learn new things without a screen. Um, so, think about what your kids are really interested in, and if they're trying to figure out what they're interested in, you know, um, let's get some books from the library, or maybe they do some research outside of quiet time so that they have activities to do during quiet time. um but I think this is something that everybody can benefit from, including you as a parent. Okay. um and so before I get into that, I just want to say, so usually quiet time is 45 minutes to 2 hours, depending on your child. So because we do this and it often transitions to a nap, ours can go up to 3 hours, because a lot of times Eric will play for like an hour and then he'll nap for two. Or sometimes he'll play for 2 hours and he'll nap for an hour. So we do it a little bit longer because it's the time slot where the nap was. If I were doing it with older kids, um, I'd probably stick close to like an hour. Especially if they're doing like reading or something creative. Um, they can, that doesn't need as much time, and they also don't need as much restoration either. Because when you're talking about adults, um, adults probably need 20 to 30 minutes. Okay. I'm actually reading a book right now. We'll put a link to it in the show notes for this episode, but it's called No Fail Habits. And I think I've talked about it in here a couple times. Um, I'm almost done with it. So hopefully you'll hear me stop talking about it soon. Um, but it's a really good book if you're trying to build in routines. And I just finished reading in the book where they talk about how Michael Hyatt has basically taken naps, a 20 to 30-minute nap after lunch, pretty much every day, for like the past like 30 or 40 years. Um, even as he's, gone up the ranks in working for other people. He started his own business. Um, and it's really interesting to see just what that rest can do for you, right? And can do for your mind. And it doesn't have to be a nap. um it can just be time where you close your eyes. It could be time you meditate. But so in the early afternoon, our circadian rhythm, right, which is responsible for um for sleep and for energy, and kind of those ups and downs that we have. It is natural for you to have a dip in your energy levels in the afternoon. And so, and instead of trying to power through that and caffeinate your way through that, like, let's sit with it for a little bit. So you can do 20 to 30 minutes. In that 20 to 30 minutes, you can, so we have like one of those massage chairs that I bought for Jeff. Sometimes I'll do that. Sometimes I'll meditate. Sometimes I'll just do like some gentle stretching. Sometimes I'll read. Sometimes I will close my eyes for 20 to 30 minutes. But I find that stepping away from my desk, um, drinking a little bit of water and just kind of letting my brain go for a little bit is so helpful. It really is. Um, it has really helped me, um, transition into the afternoon with more energy, with more excitement for what I'm doing. Um, it's also, it just kind of helps to restore me. And it works as a nice transition to the afternoon, a nice reset. And I really encourage you, like, I know you're like, Kristen, I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time in the day. There are not enough things. Um, and I get that. Trust me, I was looking at my schedule last night as I was doing my weekly review, and I was like, there's not enough time this week. There's not enough time at my desk. There's not enough time to do things. Um, and I get that. However, if you give yourself 20 minutes to restore before you jump into a busy afternoon, you're going to be more productive. You're going to get more done, you're going to be more focused. And so sometimes taking that 20 minutes will make you so much more effective in the afternoon. Okay, so I really encourage you to give this a try, give it a shot, not only for your kids, but for you as well. So, maybe once, you get them quiet, um, either at the beginning of quiet time or at the end of quiet time, or maybe you take a break in the middle of quiet time. Take a little bit of time for you too, um, just so that you can recharge a little bit and be in a better place for, when your kids wake up, right? Because your kids are going to wake up refreshed, or they're going to come out of quiet time more refreshed, and you're going to need the energy to match them, right? And so taking a little bit of time for you is really beneficial. All right, so I hope this episode was helpful for you. If you haven't already done so, please leave a review wherever you're listening to the show, because that helps other people find us. Our numbers are growing every single month. We really appreciate you. You're telling people about the show, you're sharing it with other people. And so please continue to do that. It does really help. All right, mamas, thank you so much. And you have a great week. Take care. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to Small Biz Mama with Kristen Ingram. If you'd like to learn how to create more margin in your life, please visit us at smallbizmama.com. That's smallbizmama.com.